Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Logan Bennett always had both feet firmly on the ground. He was the kind of man who liked routine, predictability, and doing things the right way. At 37, he worked as an ambulance driver in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the night shift, which required almost superhuman focus to handle extreme situations where every second counted. He was a respected professional, known for staying calm even in the most chaotic scenes, and admired by his co-workers for his punctuality, dedication, and integrity. Every night, Logan carried the weight of lives at risk, but he returned home with the same careful routine, as if he knew someone was waiting for him with the lights low and breakfast ready. That someone was Natalie, his wife of 6 years, with whom he shared a simple but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. A digital marketing analyst, she had been working remotely since the start of the pandemic and eventually made working from home a permanent lifestyle. She spent her days in video meetings, writing reports, reviewing campaigns, and managing various client projects. The spare bedroom had become her professional sanctuary, while the living room, often quiet during the day, came to life when Logan returned from his shifts. To anyone who knew them, their relationship seemed stable. There were no scandals, public fights, or visible disagreements. They appeared to be the picture of normalcy, a couple who had learned to balance different schedules, mismatched routines, and shared responsibilities. On weekends, when his shift allowed, Logan made it a point to prepare breakfast, while Natalie quietly took care of the house. They enjoyed watching movies together, splitting chores, and chatting about everyday things like the weather forecast or the latest local news. They didn't have kids, but they talked about it occasionally, with a mix of planning and caution. Their relationship, though lacking grand romantic gestures, was comfortable. There was affection, respect, partnership. Logan trusted Natalie with the same certainty he trusted his own instincts during an emergency. There had never been a reason to doubt anything. She was calm, organized, grounded. And he saw all of that as unshakable qualities. Natalie rarely left the house at night. She said she preferred staying safe, using the quiet to read or watch series while Logan worked. Sometimes, he even felt guilty for not being around, but she always reassured him, saying she understood how important his job was. On social media, they kept a low profile. A few photos together on short trips, the occasional post for special dates, affectionate messages on birthdays. Nothing that stood out, nothing that raised suspicion. On the surface, it was the kind of relationship many people dream of, solid, drama-free, built on mutual trust and respect. To the outside world, they were seen as a well-balanced couple. Neighbors greeted them with smiles, friends praised their harmony, and both of their families admired how they managed to keep everything balanced despite Logan's demanding schedule. The fact that Natalie was always home reinforced the image of stability. She kept regular hours, took care of meals, remembered important dates, and always asked about his day, even during the toughest nights. Logan valued all of that. To him, there was no room for doubt. He believed love was shown in the little things: coffee at the right time, a sweet message during his shift, a caring gesture without being asked. And it was with this quiet certainty that he moved through his days. Life could be exhausting, work could drain every ounce of energy, but when he came home, he knew he'd find peace. Natalie was his anchor. The person he shared silences, victories, and frustrations with. There had never been suspicion, crises, or signs that anything was off. She seemed content with the life they had. Bills were paid, future plans were discussed maturely, and they both respected each other's space. Logan, even as he dealt daily with other people's tragedies, never imagined something similar could ever touch his own life. To him, home was a safe harbor. And Natalie was the reason for that. Nothing in their routine hinted at what was coming. No strange gestures, no changes in behavior, no details out of the ordinary. The marriage, in his eyes, was functional and calm. The trust he placed in Natalie was absolute, built day after day, night after night, over 6 years of mostly uneventful life together. And that's exactly why, when the truth emerged, the impact was so much deeper. Because betrayal, when it comes from someone you never expected, doesn't just destroy the relationship. It reshapes everything you believed about love, loyalty, and safety. But Logan didn't know that yet. At that point, he only knew one thing: he blindly trusted the wife who slept at home while he saved lives across the city. The night started like any other for Logan. The clock read just past 10 when he arrived at the station for another shift. He put on his uniform, checked the equipment, and received the handover report from the previous crew. It was a Wednesday night, seemingly quiet in Grand Rapids. Nothing suggested anything unusual was about to happen. He ran through the ambulance checklist, as he did every day, then settled into the driver's seat, waiting for the first call. Deep down, he hoped for few calls. Not out of laziness, but because he knew each call meant someone was suffering. Just before midnight, the radio crackled. Dispatch gave coordinates for a traffic accident less than 10 minutes away. 2 victims, collision with possible loss of consciousness, intersection of 28th Street and East Beltline Avenue. Logan confirmed, turned on the sirens, and left with his partner beside him, exchanging few words. On the way, he mentally reviewed the protocols. The route was familiar. The road wasn't the busiest at that hour, but accidents there weren't rare. The time between the call and arrival was under 6 minutes. As he parked the ambulance, Logan saw the headlights of one of the cars still on and a small crowd of onlookers kept back by a police officer who'd arrived earlier. He got out, grabbed the medical kit, and approached. The more damaged car had stopped sideways on the sidewalk, hood crumpled, windshield cracked. The passenger side window was blown out, and the airbag had deployed. Logan moved toward the driver's door, but when he circled the vehicle, something froze him for a second. His eyes locked onto the woman inside. For a moment, he thought he was seeing things. The image hit him so hard his stomach turned. The woman in the front passenger seat, with a cut on her forehead and her head slumped to the side, was Natalie. His wife. Next to her, in the driver's seat, a man unconscious, head resting on the steering wheel. Logan froze. The scene in front of him was impossible to ignore. She shouldn't have been there. At that hour, on that street, with that man. Logan's mind spun. Everything around him seemed to go silent for a moment. He tried to control his breathing, but it felt like he couldn't get enough air. His partner called his name twice before he reacted. Logan approached the door, carefully tested the handle, and quickly assessed the victim's conditions. Natalie was conscious, though dazed. She had a small cut bleeding on the side of her head but responded to stimuli. The man remained unconscious, with unstable vital signs. Logan felt his hands tremble for a second, but forced himself to focus. Here, before being a husband, he was a first responder. With his partner's help, he removed the man from the driver's seat and placed him on the stretcher. Then he returned to Natalie. She slowly opened her eyes, recognized Logan, and blinked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She tried to say something, but he just signaled for her not to speak. The pain of seeing her there was real, but in that moment, he couldn't let himself fall apart. He secured the stretcher straps with precision, applied quick first aid, and ensured she was stabilized. Inside the ambulance, while his partner tended to the man, Logan secured Natalie's stretcher and moved to the driver's seat. There was no exchange of words. Just heavy glances, loaded with everything that was still to come. During the drive to the hospital, he kept his eyes on the road, focused on traffic, as if that could stop his mind from collapsing. The sirens didn't drown out what he felt inside. His head pounded with questions that had no shape yet, but his body knew something serious had been exposed. When they arrived at the hospital, he handed both patients over to the medical team and completed the incident report. He maintained professionalism, as always. But inside, a crack had already begun to form. And he knew nothing would ever be the same from that point on. The hospital released Natalie after 4 days of observation. Her tests were stable, the stitches on the side of her head were healing well, and the medical team found no lasting effects. The recommendation was rest and follow-up in the coming days. Logan picked her up personally, as any husband would. He arrived at the hospital with a face worn down by sleepless nights and an expression hard to read. The drive home was silent. Natalie stared out the window, her forehead slightly furrowed, as if searching for a way to start a conversation. Logan kept his eyes on the road, avoiding any gesture that might show emotion. When they got home, Natalie settled on the couch and slowly took off her shoes. She looked visibly drained. Her face still showed signs of bruising, and the bandage on her forehead was an uncomfortable reminder of what had happened. Logan went to the kitchen, got a glass of water, brought it back, and handed it to her. He sat in the armchair across from her, crossed his arms, and stared at her for a few seconds. There was no more putting it off. The image of her in the front seat with a strange man wouldn't leave his mind. That intersection at 28th and East Beltline was now more than just a point on a map. It was the exact moment everything began to fall apart. Logan's voice came out dry, direct, with no hesitation. He asked who the man was. He asked what she was doing with him, in a car, at that hour of the night. Natalie looked away. She said he was a rideshare driver. That she'd had an argument with her sister on the phone and decided to go to her house to sort things out in person. Since she didn't have a car, she ordered a ride. She said the man was just the driver, and the route passed through that area because of an alternate path. Logan didn't answer right away. He just stared. He knew something didn't add up. He knew the way to Natalie's sister's house, which was in a residential area north of the city. There was no logic in going through 28th Street in that direction, especially at that hour. Plus, there was another detail that hadn't left his mind since he saw the car: Natalie was in the front seat. Whenever she used rideshares, she sat in the back. Always. It was a habit. They'd talked about it before. She said she felt safer in the back, as a way to keep some distance. So Logan asked why, if it was a rideshare driver, she was sitting in the front. Natalie hesitated. She said she was feeling nauseous and asked to sit up front to feel better. She tried to keep her tone natural, but her voice trembled. Logan didn't react immediately. He just kept staring, as if dismantling her story piece by piece. He asked why she hadn't told him she was leaving the house. He reminded her that when he left for his shift that night, she was in pajamas, saying she was going to bed early. Natalie replied she decided at the last minute. That she didn't think it was important to mention. The excuses started piling up and contradicting each other. First, she said she'd argued with her sister. Then she said she was just going to talk. Soon after, she claimed her sister didn't even know she was coming. Logan crossed his arms again. He asked for the name of the supposed driver. Natalie said she didn't remember. He asked if she could show the ride on the app. She said she'd cleared the history and didn't know how to navigate the platform well. Logan stayed silent for a moment. Then he calmly said none of this made sense. That she could keep lying, but he'd already seen enough to know something was very wrong. Natalie fell silent. Her breathing grew shallow. She avoided his gaze, fidgeted with her fingers, crossed and uncrossed her legs. She still tried to act like she was in control of the story, but couldn't hide her discomfort anymore. Logan kept his tone firm. He said he wanted the truth. That he wouldn't make a scene, but he wouldn't be treated like a fool. Natalie tried to defend herself again, repeating parts of her original story, but the chain of contradictions was too obvious now. She said she was going one way, but the accident GPS showed a different direction. She said the driver was random, but couldn't explain why they were on a less common route at that hour. Each new sentence made the story collapse further. Finally, Natalie went quiet. There was no way to keep up that version. Her eyes dropped to the floor, her shoulders slumped, and the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Logan still didn't know the real explanation, but he was certain the one he'd just heard was a lie. And in that moment, the pain of the lie hurt as much as the betrayal he still couldn't name. The silence between them became the confirmation of everything she'd tried to hide. And Logan, even without hearing a confession, already understood that his life had crossed a point of no return. Natalie stayed silent for over a minute, sitting on the couch with her eyes fixed on a random spot on the wall. Logan was still in the armchair across from her, watching in silence. He didn't need to say anything more. The lack of arguments, the inconsistent answers, and her obvious discomfort made it clear her story had reached its limit. Then she took a deep breath, rested her elbows on her knees, and covered her face with her hands. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper, as if she didn't want to hear what she was about to say. She said it didn't start that night. That the man in the car was someone she'd been involved with for some time. That it wasn't planned, that it happened gradually, but that it was real. Logan didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. She went on, saying it began months earlier. That he was someone she'd met by chance at a cafe where she sometimes worked to change her environment. She said it started with glances, then conversations, and over time they began meeting more often. She said there was no passion, no plans for a future together. It was more about the moment, about feeling alive, about breaking routine. Each word seemed harder to say than the last, but she kept going. She admitted the meetings usually happened late at night, on the nights Logan was on shift. They chose discreet places, stayed together briefly, and returned to their lives as if nothing had happened. Logan watched her with a blank expression. Inside, everything felt suspended. It was as if his body was present, but his mind refused to absorb it all at once. The pain was real, but it was muffled by a kind of emotional numbness. When she finished, there was no shouting, no crying. Logan just stood up from the armchair, walked down the hall, and stopped with his back to her. He said there was nothing more to discuss. That the marriage ended there. That there was no room left for rebuilding or further explanations. He told her to pack her things and go to her sister's place the next day. He said she could take the time she needed to recover physically, but he wouldn't share the same roof anymore. Natalie didn't respond. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, but she knew it was pointless to try to fix it. Logan had been clear. The decision wasn't impulsive. It was the direct result of an irreparable break. The next morning, she packed 2 suitcases and texted her sister. She was picked up by a rideshare and taken to the northern part of the city, where she'd stay indefinitely. The house became quieter than ever. Logan spent the rest of the day without turning on the TV or answering messages. He just followed his routine. He took a shower, ate something quick, and sat on the couch staring into nothing. In the days that followed, he returned to work. He kept his usual demeanor, but inside he carried the weight of an ending that still hurt. He never tried to find the man who had been in the car with Natalie. He knew the man was still hospitalized, under observation, but he chose to stay away. He didn't want details. He didn't want to see the man's face or hear explanations. For Logan, what mattered now was preserving the one thing that still made sense, his dignity. Avoiding confrontation with that man wasn't weakness, it was self-control. He had already lost a marriage. He wouldn't lose himself too. Natalie spent the first few weeks at her sister's place without making plans. Her body still felt the aftermath of the accident, but her mind weighed heavier. The routine in the new house was simple. She slept poorly, ate little, and spent hours staring at her phone without knowing what to write. She drafted messages to Logan, trying to explain things she didn't fully understand herself. She never sent them. She deleted everything and set the phone aside. When her body allowed more movement, she returned to working from home, delivered campaigns on time, and kept her professional composure. But the distant look in her eyes during video meetings gave away the inner chaos. Meanwhile, Logan got back into his shift rhythm. He drove the same way he always had, but there was a difference in his eyes. His co-workers noticed he spoke less, avoided long conversations during breaks, and left the station quickly when his shift ended. He didn't tell anyone what had happened, but one or two close colleagues knew in general that the marriage was over. They didn't ask for details. They respected his silence. Logan didn't seek distractions. He finished his shift, went home, got the sleep he needed, and returned the next day. During his drives, he remembered old scenes, small gestures that once seemed trivial. The note in his lunchbox, the towel folded on the bed, the "good night" message. None of that would come back. 2 weeks after the accident, the man who had been in the car with Natalie was discharged from the hospital. He left quietly, no public contact, no statements. Logan heard about it from others, but showed no interest in reaching out. He didn't want apologies or confrontations. He understood that dwelling on it would only open deeper wounds. He made a conscious choice: protect his career and his inner peace. The man existed, but he wouldn't be part of Logan's life in any way. Simply not going after him was, for Logan, a way to hold on to what little dignity he had left. As the weeks passed, Logan started going to a small cafe near the station, one that served pancakes and had sidewalk tables. That's where he ran into Jeff, an old high school friend he hadn't seen in years. They exchanged numbers and soon began meeting more often. Jeff introduced him to other friends, some single, some divorced, all with different stories of loss. It wasn't a support group, but it ended up serving that purpose. In these casual conversations, Logan started laughing again, even if just a little. He started listening to stories that didn't involve sirens, deadlines, or betrayal. It was as if, slowly, the world beyond tragedy was being rebuilt around him. At night, at home, there was still silence. But it was a less oppressive silence. Logan began filling his time with small home projects, old books, and movies that had been on his list for months. Sometimes he'd look at the bedroom he once shared with Natalie and remember everything. But he didn't feel anger anymore. He just felt a strange emptiness, like walking into a room where furniture used to be and now only echoes remain. He began to understand that some losses aren't fixed by answers, but by time. That not every pain demands revenge, and moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, but learning to walk with the scar. Natalie didn't try to come back. She didn't show up unexpectedly. She respected the silence, as if knowing any attempt at reconciliation would be useless. She rented a small apartment near the Alger Heights neighborhood, returned to managing her own life, and reconnected with old professional contacts. Slowly, she tried to rebuild what had broken, even knowing some pieces would always be missing. She knew the version of herself that had betrayed someone like Logan wasn't easy to face in the mirror. But it was the only one she had left. And it was up to her to deal with it. As for Logan, he moved forward without rushing. He didn't seek new relationships or try to fill the void with temporary distractions. He chose to rediscover who he was outside the role of husband. He took care of himself, his home, and his friendships. On the evening of an ordinary Saturday, he hung a new frame on the living room wall, with a photo taken at the top of a hiking trail he used to frequent in his youth. It was a picture of himself, alone, looking out at the horizon. In a way, it symbolized everything. Accepting the past, acknowledging the loss, and choosing to keep going. Even if alone. Even if scarred. But still standing. And whole. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.